For a simple Scotch sipper of a cocktail, you should try out a Williams. Let me show you how to make it. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and like I said, this week I'm making a simple Scotch sipper of a cocktail. I'm making a Williams. Now, this cocktail originally dates from the 1930s or thereabouts, and like a lot of cocktails from that time, it uses a spirit, in this case Scotch whiskey, and rather than adding fruit juices or things like that to the cocktail, it gets its flavor and its different kind of complex notes from some liqueurs. In this case, we're using some vermouth and some chartreuse. Now, the chartreuse in question, it's Yellow Chartreuse. It's a little bit different than the green chartreuse that you might be more familiar with. Yellow Chartreuse, it's a little lighter. It's 43% alcohol by volume instead of the 55% of the green chartreuse. It's got a lot of the same herbal botanical notes, but it's a bit softer, a bit sweeter, and kind of does help to balance out cocktails like this that are quite boozy and spirit forward. We're also using some vermouth, which is like an aromatized wine. We add some spices, botanical notes, maybe a bit of sugar to a wine, and you fortify it and you make it a little stronger and just kind of make it into a good cocktail ingredient. And lastly, uses some orange bitters to round it out. So this is going to be quite like a boozy, spirit forward cocktail. If you look on the Diffords page for this cocktail, I'll put a link to that down below. You'll see that the Diffords kind of recommendation for this cocktail is if you find it a bit too boozy, a bit too spirit forward, you could serve it on the rocks. So you could dilute it down a little bit more by serving it on the rocks and kind of take away some of that heavy duty boozy note from it. But I'm going to be serving this up straight because my vermouth, it's not a fully dry vermouth. This is a kind of a semi-dry vermouth. If you want, the original recipe does call for a fully dry vermouth. This is a bit of a semi-dry vermouth. It's not fully sweet like a proper red vermouth. It's not fully dry like a classic white vermouth. It's somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit more towards the dry side. But because it's got that little bit of extra sweetness, I think it helps balance it out and helps me serve it up rather than going for on the rocks and diluting it down and kind of stripping away some of those botanical notes. But that's enough talking about the cocktail. I think it's time we make it. It is a stirred drink, so we're going to get our mixing glass and we're going to pop a nice rock of ice in there before we measure out the rest of our ingredients. So we start off with our Scotch whiskey. This is Teacher's Highland Cream, which is a blended Scotch whiskey, and the cocktail does call for a blended Scotch whiskey. If you want to see a review of this whiskey, I'll put a link to it down below, but I reviewed this whiskey just this week, and if you want to see that down below, I'll put a link down below because I put out whiskey reviews every Wednesday. Next up is going to be our Yellow Chartreuse. Now, Chartreuse is quite strong. Like I said, this is a softer, sweeter version of the green Chartreuse, but it is still quite botanical, still quite full flavored. It can be kind of hard to find Chartreuse these days because the monks have kind of scaled back their production, but I was able to find a bunch of these kind of 200 milliliter size bottles, so you should be able to find it still on shelves. You might just have to do a little bit of looking. So that there was 15 milliliters of our Yellow Chartreuse, which is going to give us a lot of full flavor into the cocktail. And lastly, we are using our vermouth. Like I said, this is like a Bianco vermouth. So it's a kind of a off dry, not fully sweet, not fully dry vermouth. So we're going to go in with 15 ml of this into there, and it's going to help balance out our cocktail. Lastly up, it is our orange bitters. So just going to go in with 1 dash of our orange bitters, plain and simple, just like that. And then we're going to stir it down. We're going to stir it for about 30-35 seconds to get a nice bit of dilution into the cocktail, but also to get everything nice and chilled. Okay, I can feel from the outside of my mixing glass that this is nicely chilled, so we're going to go ready to strain it out into a nice chilled Nick and Nora. We're just going to put our Hawthorne strainer up top just to catch that big block of ice, and we're going to strain this out. Nice and simple, just like that. We're not fully finished yet though, because we are going to garnish this cocktail. We're not going to express the oils of an orange peel over the top. We're just going to put it there, just over the edge. And that right there is how I make a Williams. Now real quick, before I taste this cocktail, if you're new here, scroll down, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey reviews like the review of that Teacher's every Wednesday, and I put out cocktail recipes like this featuring whiskey every Friday. So if you want to see those, make sure you're subscribed. But now, let's give this one a taste. It is quite kind of boozy and spirit forward and herbal and botanical, so I can see why the Diffords page does kind of recommend, if it's a bit too spirit forward, that you might serve it on the rocks, because I could see if you used a fully dry vermouth, This could be kind of going in the direction of something like a Negroni or like a Boulevardier, where you get that heavy duty kind of herbal hit and it's almost drying. But because I use that Bianco vermouth, it's somewhere in the middle. It's a little bit sweeter, a little bit softer, and I think it does help balance out the cocktail and make it into something you can sip, like almost like an after dinner sipper. It's not too sweet though. It's not like so sweet it's a sugary cocktail. It's nowhere like an old fashioned or something like that. The chartreuse, the vermouth, they work well. They add a bit of sweetness, but a lot of herbal notes. The flavor of the Scotch is there kind of in the background. Like that's a kind of a creamy, slightly smoky Scotch. And you're getting a little bit of that, but like I said, if you watch the review of that, the peat smoke in it, it's not like really like a campfire smoke. It's more like an earthy, herbal kind of smoke, and that's kind of working well with the herbal botanical notes you get in the other ingredients there. The whiskey, it does have a bit of a kind of a grain whiskey note that wasn't really great in the review, but here that's masked, that's hidden. You get that nice kind of malty note rather than that kind of that note that wasn't really enjoyable in the review, but it's actually working quite well here with that herbal smokiness coming through. If you got any ideas for cocktail recipes featuring Scotch whiskey, let me know in the comments down below, because Scotch whiskey I feel isn't used in a lot of cocktails, but when it's used right, it can add a lot of flavor like it does right here. So I'm gonna keep on enjoying it. If you've got any ideas, let me know down below, and I will see you next time. Sláinte.